again, on stream, I'm realizing, oh, you know, I forgot a lot that I had read before, and it's really neat to go back after the movies and reread it and get a new perspective. So I think it's good to reread the same book over again, but it's also good to read new books, so make sure you don't just stick to the ones you know. Alright, so here we go. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Chapter 1, Owl Post. Gotta get into my British narrator vibe. Harry Potter was a highly unusual boy in many ways. For one thing, he hated the summer holidays more than any other time of year. That is very unusual. Who hates the summer? For another, he really wanted to do his homework, but was forced to do it in secret in the dead of night. And he also happened to be a wizard. Which of those is weirdest, though, really? In today's day and age, I bet some of you could argue that it's weirder to be a kid who likes to do your homework and hates summer vacation than it is to be a wizard. Think about that. It was nearly midnight, and he was lying on his front in bed, the blankets drawn right over his head like a tent, a torch in one hand, and a large, leather-bound book, A History of Magic, by Bathilda Bagshot, propped open against the pillow. Harry moved the tip of his eagle feather quill down the page, frowning as he looked for something that would help him write his essay, Witch Burning in the 14th Century. It was completely pointless. Discuss. The quill paused at the top of a likely-looking paragraph. Harry pushed his round glasses up his nose, moved his torch closer to the book, and read. And here's the first little picture there. Non-magic people, more commonly known as muggles, were particularly afraid of magic in medieval times, but not very good at recognizing it. On the rare occasion that they did catch a real witch or wizard, burning had no effect whatsoever. The witch or wizard would perform a basic flame-freezing charm and then pretend to shriek in pain while enjoying a gentle tickling sensation. Indeed, Gwendolyn the Weird enjoyed being burnt so much that she allowed herself to be caught no fewer than 47 times in various disguises. That's kind of funny, but it's sad to think of all of the humans that were actually burned, and that is some true history right there. The burning of witches. Did that happen in England as well as in America? I guess so. Never really learned about that in school over here in the States. We only learned about the one in Massachusetts. Harry put his quill between his teeth and reached underneath his pillow for an ink bottle and a roll of parchment. Slowly and very carefully, he unscrewed the ink bottle, dipped his quill into it, and began to write, pausing every now and then to listen, because if any of the Dursleys heard the scratching of his quill on the way to the bathroom, he'd probably find himself locked in the cupboard under the stairs for the rest of the summer. What kind of parents get mad when the kid does their homework? So strange. What is more strange, though, that I never thought to question as a child reading these books is, why do they use quill and parchment? This is in modern times, no? So why aren't they using modern pen and ink? There's no reason to use a quill and parchment. Is that, like, more magical, or just they want to follow tradition? Are there schools in England that still use quill and parchment? Or they just wanted to do that for Harry Potter because it seemed more like magic and fancy. Anyway, can't argue that it's cool, but definitely inefficient, especially when you're trying to do your homework under the tent that you've made of your room. The Dursley family of number 4 Privet Drive was the reason Harry never enjoyed his summer holidays. Uncle Vernon, Aunt Petunia, and their son Dudley were Harry's only living relatives. They were muggles, and they had a very medieval attitude towards magic. Harry's dead parents, who had been a witch and wizard themselves, were never mentioned under the Dursleys' roof. For years, Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon had hoped that if they'd kept Harry as downtrodden as possible, they would be able to squash the magic out of him. To their fury, they had been unsuccessful, and now lived in terror of anyone finding out that Harry had spent most of the last 2 years at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The most the Dursleys could do these days was to lock away Harry's spellbooks, wand, cauldron, and broomstick at the start of summer holidays, and forbid him to talk to the neighbors. Okay, I found a very cool, life connection here. Whatever your personal magic is in your life, whether it be that you are a really talented musician, you just love music, or you're an artist, you love to imagine the art, or you're very creative. I think of creativity stuff a lot, I guess, as examples. But whatever your personal magic is, like being someone who's very optimistic or being someone who's very good at video games, it cannot be extinguished out of you. No matter how much the Dursleys of your lives try to squash your magic, it just comes out. If you remember in the first book, they tried so hard just to prevent Harry from reading his Hogwarts acceptance letter, but no, the more they tried to prevent him from reading the letter, the more letters came. And that's very symbolic to what happens in real life. The more people try to squash out your magic, the more your personal magic, and I'm using magic here as a way to just define whatever is special about you, it's going to fight to be let out. And until you let it out, you will never get to experience the life you were meant to have. And same thing with Harry. Until he went to Hogwarts, he never got to experience who he was truly meant to be, which is this amazing, talented, brave wizard. Just think about how the Dursleys felt about Harry, just this nasty, terrible person. No one at school would know that Harry is this destined to be hero. But as soon as he goes to Hogwarts and lets his magic, what's special about him, become known, then suddenly everyone realizes how great and wonderful he is. And it's the same for you. Don't let other people squash your magic, but if they try to, just know that they can never squash it completely. And the more they try to squash it, the more you can make it grow. This separation from his spellbooks had been a real problem for Harry, because his teachers at Hogwarts had given him a lot of holiday work. One of the essays, a particularly nasty one about shrinking potions, was for Harry's least favorite teacher, Professor Snape, who would be delighted to have an excuse to give Harry detention for a month. Harry had therefore seized his chance in the first week of the holidays. While Uncle Vernon, Aunt Petunia, and Dudley had gone out into the front garden to admire Uncle Vernon's new company car in very loud voices, so the rest of the street would notice it too, Harry had crept downstairs, picked the lock on the cupboard under the stairs, grabbed some of his books, and hid them in his bedroom. As long as he didn't leave spots of ink on the sheets, the Dursleys need never know that he was studying magic by night. Harry was keen to avoid trouble with his aunt and uncle at the moment, as they were already in a bad mood with him, all because he'd received a telephone call from a fellow wizard 1 week in the school holidays. Ron Weasley, who was one of Harry's best friends at Hogwarts, came from a whole family of wizards. This meant that he knew a lot of things Harry didn't, but had never used a telephone before. Most unluckily, it had been Uncle Vernon who had answered a call. Vernon Dursley speaking. Harry, who happened to be in the room at the time, froze as he heard Ron's voice answer. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? I want to talk to Harry Potter. Ron was yelling so loudly that Uncle Vernon jumped and held the receiver a foot away from his ear, staring at it with an expression of mingled fury and alarm. Who is this? he roared at the direction of the mouthpiece. "Who are you?" "Ron Weasley!" Ron bellowed back. As though he and Uncle Vernon were speaking from opposite ends of a football pitch. "I'm a friend of Harry's from school." Uncle Vernon's small eyes swiveled around to Harry, who was rooted to the spot. "There is no Harry Potter here!" he roared, now holding the receiver at arm's length, as though frightened it might explode. "I don't know what school you're talking about. Never contact me again. Don't you come near my family." And he threw the receiver back onto the telephone, as if dropping a poisonous spider. The row that had followed had been one of the worst ever. "How dare you give this number to people like you!" Uncle Vernon had roared, spraying Harry with spit. Ron obviously realized that he'd got Harry into trouble, because he hadn't called again. Harry's other best friend from Hogwarts, Hermione Granger, hadn't been in touch either. Harry suspected that Ron had warned Hermione not to call, which was a pity, because Hermione was the cleverest witch in Harry's year. She had Muggle parents, and she knew perfectly well how to use a telephone, and would probably not have had enough sense to say that she went to Hogwarts. Oh, she probably would have had enough sense to say that she went to Hogwarts. So, Harry had no word from any of his wizarding friends for 5 long weeks. And this summer was turning out to be almost as bad as the last one. There was just one very small improvement. After swearing that he wouldn't use her to send letters to any of his friends, Harry had been allowed to let his owl Hedwig out at night. Uncle Vernon had given in because of the racket Hedwig made if she was locked in her cage all the time. Harry finished writing about Gwendolyn the Weird and paused to listen again. The silence in the dark house was broken only by the distant grunting snores of his enormous cousin Dudley. Remember last year was when all of the letters from his friends were taken and held captive by Dobby, the house elf. But this year, Dobby is staying out of trouble. So, no letters being intercepted. However, I guess he's still not receiving them because Hedwig is locked in her cage and then not allowed to get letters at night. It must have been very late. Harry's eyes were itching with tiredness. Perhaps he'd finish his essay tomorrow night. He'd replace the top of the ink bottle, pulled an old pillowcase from under his bed, put the torch, a history of magic, his essay, his quill, and ink inside of it, got out of bed, and hid the lot under a loose floorboard under his bed. Then he stood up, stretched, and checked the time on his luminous alarm clock on his bedside table. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. Harry's stomach gave a funny jolt. He had been 13 years old without realizing it for a whole hour. Oh, little Harry is 13 now. Yet another unusual thing about Harry was how little he looked forward to his birthdays. He had never received a birthday card in his life. The Dursleys had completely ignored his last 2 birthdays, and he had no reason to suppose they would remember this one. Harry walked across the dark room past Hedwig's large, empty cage to the open window. He leant on the sill, the cool night air pleasant on his face after a long time under the blankets. Hedwig had been absent for 2 nights now. Harry wasn't worried about her. She'd been gone this long before, but he hoped she'd be back soon. She was the only living creature in this house that didn't flinch at the sight of him. Harry, though still rather small and skinny for his age, had grown a few inches over the last year. His jet black hair, however, was just as it had always been, stubbornly untidy, whatever he'd do to it. The eyes behind his glasses were bright green, unless you watch him on television, where they are blue, because Daniel Radcliffe could not wear contacts as they irritated his eyes. I don't blame you, Daniel. They irritate my eyes as well. And on his forehead, clearly visible through his hair, was a thin scar shaped like a bolt of lightning. Of all the unusual things about Harry, this scar was most extraordinary of all. It was not, as the Dursleys had pretended for 10 years, a souvenir of the car crash that had killed Harry's parents, because Lily and James Potter had not died in a car crash. They had been murdered by the most feared dark wizard for 100 years, Lord Voldemort. Harry had escaped from the same attack with nothing more than a scar on his forehead when Voldemort's curse, instead of killing him, had rebounded upon its originator. Barely alive, Voldemort had fled. But Harry had come face to face with him since at Hogwarts. Remembering their last meeting as he stood at the dark window, Harry had to admit he was lucky even to have reached his 13th birthday. Ooh. He scanned the starry sky for a sign of Hedwig, perhaps soaring back to him with a dead mouse dangling from her beak, expecting praise. Gazing absently over the rooftops, it was a few seconds before Harry realized what he was seeing. Silhouetted against the golden moon, and growing larger every moment, was a large, strangely lopsided creature, and it was flapping in Harry's direction. He stood quite still, watching it sink lower and lower. For a split second, he hesitated, his hand on the window latch, wondering whether to slam it shut. But then the bizarre creature soared over one of the street lamps of Privet Drive, and Harry, realizing what it was, leapt aside. Through the window soared 3 owls, 2 of them holding up the third, which appeared to be unconscious. They landed with a soft flump on Harry's bed, and the middle owl, which was large and grey, keeled right over and lay motionless. There was a large package tied to its legs. We should use owl post today. It would be very effective, don't you think? With all of the interception you could have through the mail. You know, you always worry if you send money or a check that someone's gonna steal it. Who's gonna steal your mail from an owl? Especially if the owl's trained not to give your mail to anybody else along the way. It would be so effective and so cute. You just open your door and there's an owl and it's adorable and it pecks your hand and gives you your mail. We should invest in this. This is clearly the future. Harry recognized the unconscious owl at once. His name was Errol, and he belonged to the Weasley family. Poor Weasley family. They can't afford anything, not even good owls. Everything's secondhand. It's a secondhand owl. Harry dashed to the bed at once, untied the cords around Errol's legs, took off the parcel, and then carried Errol to Hedwig's cave. Errol opened one bleary eye and gave a feeble hoot of thanks and began to gulp some water. Harry turned back to the remaining owls. One of them, the large, snowy female, was his own Hedwig. She too was carrying a parcel and looked extremely pleased with herself. She gave Harry an affectionate nip with her beak as he removed her burden, then flew across the room to join Errol. Harry didn't recognize the third owl, a handsome, tawny one, but he knew at once where it had come from because in addition to a third parcel, it was carrying a letter bearing the Hogwarts crest. When Harry relieved this owl of its post, it ruffled its feathers importantly, stretched out its wings, and took off through the window into the night. Harry sat down on his bed, grabbed Errol's package, ripped off the brown paper, and discovered a present wrapped in gold. And his first ever birthday card. How sweet. Fingers trembling slightly, he opened the envelope. 2 pieces of paper fell out, a letter and a newspaper cutting. The cutting had clearly come out of the wizarding newspaper, the Daily Prophet, because the people, in black and white, picture were moving. Harry picked up the cutting, smoothed it out, and read, Ministry of Magic Employee Scoops Grand Prize. Arthur Weasley, head of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office at the Ministry of Magic, has won the annual Daily Prophet grand prize galleon draw. A delighted Mr. Weasley told the Daily Prophet, "We will be spending the gold on a summer holiday in Egypt, where our eldest son, Bill, works as a curse breaker for Gringotts Wizarding Bank. The Weasley family will be spending a month in Egypt, returning for the start of a new school year at Hogwarts, which 5 of the Weasley children currently attend." Ah, there's a picture. So cute. It's the Weasley family. All right. Harry scanned the moving photograph, and a grin spread across his face as he saw all 9 of the Weasleys waving furiously at him, standing in front of a large pyramid. Plump little Mrs. Weasley, tall, balding Mr. Weasley, 6 sons and 1 daughter. All, though the black and white picture didn't show it, with flaming red hair. Right in the middle of the picture was Ron, tall and gangling, with his pet rat Scabbers on his shoulder and his arm around his little sister Ginny. Harry couldn't think of anyone who deserved to win a large pile of gold more than the Weasleys, who were very nice and extremely poor. He picked up Ron's letter and unfolded it. "Dear Harry, happy birthday! Look, I'm really sorry about the telephone call. I hope the Muggles didn't give you a hard time. I asked Dad and he reckons I shouldn't have shouted. It's brilliant here in Egypt. Bill's taken us around all the tombs and you wouldn't believe the curses those old Egyptian wizards put on them. Mum wouldn't let Jenny come with us in the last one. There were all these mutant skeletons in there of Muggles who'd broken in and grown extra heads and stuff. I couldn't believe it when Dad won the Daily Prophet draw. 700 galleons! Most of it's gone on this holiday. They're going to buy me a new wand for next year. Oh, great! That's awesome. Oh. If you'll remember from last year, Ron's wand broke when they were trying to get to Hogwarts from the Whomping Willow. Willow that whomps. It broke his wand, and all year long, all of his skills were backfiring. He tried to curse Malfoy with slugs and got slugs in his mouth, but it ended up being for the better because at the very end of the book, they were about to be cursed by their teacher. Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, who was a total jerk. Okay, he was very pompous. Tried to curse them with a memory erasing spell, and it backfired, and his memory got erased, so woo! That worked out. But he needs a new wand, okay? He needs a new wand. I'm very glad that they won this so they could get him a new wand. Alright. Harry remembered only too well the occasion when Ron's old wand had snapped. It had happened when the 2 of them had been flying to Hogwarts, had crashed into a tree in the school grounds. We'll be back about a week before term starts, and we'll be going to London to get my wand and our new books. Any chance of meeting you there? Don't let the Muggles get you down. Try and come to London, Ron. P.S. Percy's head boy. He got the letter last week. That will be fun. Harry glanced back at the photograph. Percy, who was in his 7th and final year at Hogwarts, was looking particularly smug. He had pinned his head boy badge to the fez perched jauntily on top of his neat hair, his horn-rimmed glasses flashing in the Egyptian sun. Harry now turned to his present and unwrapped it. Inside, what looked like a miniature glass spinning on top. There was another note from Ron beneath it. Harry, this is a pocket sneakoscope. If there's someone untrustworthy around, it's supposed to light up and spin. Bill says it's rubbish, sold for wizard tourists, and it isn't reliable, because it kept lighting up at dinner last night. But he didn't realize Fred and George had put beetles in his soup. Bye, Ron. That's fun. Harry put the pocket sneakoscope on his bedside table where it stood quite still, balanced on its point, reflecting the luminous hands of his clock. He looked at it happily for a few seconds, then picked up the parcel Hedwig had brought. Inside this, too, there was a wrapped present, a card, and a letter. This time, from Hermione. Dear Harry, Ron wrote to me and told me about his phone call to your Uncle Vernon. I do hope you're all right. I'm on holiday in France at the moment, and I didn't know how I was going to send this to you. What if they'd opened it at customs? But then Hedwig turned up. I think she wanted to make sure you got something for your birthday for a change. I bought your present by our order. There was an advertisement in the Daily Prophet. I've been getting it delivered. It's so good to keep up with what's going on in the wizarding world. Did you see that picture of Ron and his family a week ago? I bet he's learning loads. I'm really jealous. The ancient Egyptian wizards were fascinating. I just thought of two things when Hermione was reading that, for those of you who've read the other books or seen the movies. One, she mentioned how she's getting the Daily Prophet. Oh, thanks, Anonymous. Welcome. Thanks for the subscription. One, she's getting the Daily Prophet, and in next year, the 4th book, we will find out why the Daily Prophet might make her a little bit mad. So I just find that funny that now she's subscribed to it in this book. And 2, she said how she thinks the Egyptian wizards were fascinating, and that reminds me as well of... Oh, this book, actually. In this book, we'll see how Hermione actually gets her chance to learn a little bit about the ancient wizards. Just something interesting how J.K. Rowling puts those little tidbits in there that you would never notice unless you went back and reread the books. So it's always good to reread the books if you have the time. There's some interesting local history of witchcraft here too. I've rewritten my whole history of magic essay to include some of the things I found out. I hope it's not too long. It's 2 rolls of parchment more than Professor Binns asked for. That is too long, Hermione. You need to learn to be more concise. Ron says he's going to be in London in the last week of the holidays. Can you make it? Will your aunt and uncle let you come? I really hope you can. If not, I'll see you on the Hogwarts Express on September the 1st. Love, from Hermione. P.S. Ron says Percy's head boy. I'll bet Percy's really pleased. Ron doesn't seem too happy about it. Harry laughed again as he put Hermione's letter aside and picked up her present. It was very heavy. Knowing Hermione, he was sure it would be a large book full of very difficult spells. But it wasn't. His heart gave a huge bound as he ripped back the paper and saw a sleek black leather case with the silver words stamped across it. Broomstick Servicing Kit. Wow, Hermione, Harry whispered, unzipping the case to look inside. There was a large jar of Fleetwood's high finish handle polish, a pair of gleaming silver tail twigs clippers, a tiny brass compass to clip on your broom for long journeys, and a handbook of do-it-yourself broom care. Hermione is a great gift giver. If there's anything we know about Hermione, she gives great gifts. Apart from his friends, the thing that Harry missed most about Hogwarts was Quidditch. The most popular sport in the magical world, highly dangerous, very exciting, and played on broomsticks. Harry happened to be very good Quidditch player. He had been the youngest person in a century to be picked for one of Hogwarts house teams. One of Harry's most prized possessions was his Nimbus 2000 racing broom. Harry put the leather case aside and picked up his last parcel. He recognized the untidy scrawl on brown paper at once. This was from Hagrid, the Hogwarts gamekeeper. He tore off the top layer of paper and glimpsed something green and leathery. But before he could unwrap it properly, the parcel gave a strange quiver, and whatever was inside of it snapped loudly, as though it had jaws. Harry froze. He knew that Hagrid would never send him anything dangerous on purpose, but then Hagrid didn't have a normal person's view of what was dangerous. Hagrid had been known to befriend giant spiders, buy vicious 3-headed dogs from men in pubs, and sneak illegal dragon eggs into his cabin. Harry poked the parcel nervously. It snapped loudly again. Harry reached for the lamp on his bedside table, gripped it firmly in one hand, and raised it over his head, ready to strike. Then he seized the rest of the wrapping paper in his other hand and pulled, and out fell a book. Harry just had time to register its handsome green cover, emblazoned with the golden title, The Monster Book of Monsters, before it flipped onto its edge and scuttled sideways along the bed like some weird crab. "Uh-oh," Harry muttered. The book toppled off the bed with a loud clunk and shuffled rapidly across the room. Harry followed it stealthily. The book was hiding in the dark space under his desk. Praying that the Dursleys were still fast asleep, Harry got down on his hands and knees and reached towards it. Ouch! The book snapped shut on his hand and flapped past him, still scuttling on its covers. Harry scrambled around, threw himself forward, and managed to flatten it. Uncle Vernon gave a loud, sleepy grunt in the room next door. Hedwig and Errol watched interestedly as Harry clamped the struggling book tightly in his arms, hurried to his chest of drawers, and pulled out a belt, which he buckled tightly around it. The monster book shuddered angrily, but could no longer flap and snap, so Harry threw it down on the bed and reached for Hagrid's card. Dear Harry, happy birthday! Think you might find this useful for next year. Won't say no more here. Tell you when I see ya. Hope the muggles are treating you right. All the best, Hagrid. It struck Harry as ominous that Hagrid thought a biting book would come in useful. But he put up Hagrid's card next to Ron and Hermione's, grinning more broadly than ever. Now there was only the letter from Hogwarts left. I know why Hagrid sent it to him, and I'm very excited for that. You should be too, Harry. Let's look at the picture. There's the book. It's actually brown in the movies. I think it looked more scary in the movie. Noticing that it was rather thicker than usual, Harry slit open the envelope, pulled out the first page of parchment within, and read. Dear Mr. Potter, please note, the new school year will begin on September the 1st. The Hogwarts Express will leave from King's Cross Station, platform 9 3/4, at 11 o'clock. Third years are permitted to visit the village of Hogsmeade at certain weekends. Please give the enclosed permission form to your parent or guardian to sign. A list of books for next year is enclosed. Yours sincerely, Professor McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Harry pulled out the Hogsmeade permission form and looked at it, no longer grinning. It would be wonderful to visit Hogsmeade at weekends. He knew it was an entirely wizarding village, and he had never set foot there. But how on earth was he going to persuade Uncle Vernon or Aunt Petunia to sign the form? He looked over at the alarm clock. It was now 2 o'clock in the morning. Deciding that he'd worry about the Hogsmeade form when he woke up, Harry got back into bed and reached up to cross off another day on the chart he made for himself, counting down the days left until he returned to Hogwarts. Then he took off his glasses and lay down, eyes open, facing his 3 birthday cards. Extremely unusual though he was, at that moment, Harry Potter felt just like everyone else, glad for the first time in his life that it was his birthday. Aww. And thus concludes Chapter 1 of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. And I would like to say that Hogsmeade is a wonderful place, and I've been there. It is fantastic. I went to the one that's in Florida at the Universal Studios, and it's awesome. And you can have butterbeer, and you can have pumpkin juice, and wonderful things, and all of the cool, delicious things that they talk about in Harry Potter. It's awesome. And it's expensive, but it's awesome. Alright, so I will possibly be back Wednesday And yeah, that would be the earliest I would be back. Chapter 2 is going to be Aunt Marge's Big Mistake, so look out for that. But that is the end of our reading today. Thank you guys for joining me in this reading and discussion and commentary of Harry Potter, the Prisoner of Azkaban. If you enjoyed this and you're thinking to yourself, I would love to read that book myself, well, you're in luck, because they sell this book on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com and wherever else books are sold. You could go into any bookstore, even a used bookstore or a thrift store, and probably find this book, because it is that popular. Please do that. Check out the book. Make sure you own all the book. And if you really like listening to it, and you just think, wouldn't it be great to just listen to this book over and over, then I recommend the audiobook, created by J.K. Rowling and narrated by Jim Dale. It's awesome. It's really amazing, and you should buy it. Alright. Thanks, guys. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time.